I don't think that there's any more pure expression of beauty than Karen Carpenter's voice. In the 1970s, the Carpenters were a ubiquitous presence on Top 40 radio, with songs like Close to You, Yesterday Once More, and We've Only Just Begun. Richard and Karen Carpenter's music was everywhere, but their musical legacy became overshadowed by the tragic death of Karen in 1983, at the tender age of just 32. Author Randy L Schmidt has sought to explore and celebrate Karen's life and work in his recent book, Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. He's also compiled a handy collection of articles and reviews about the Carpenters called Yesterday Once More, The Carpenter's Reader. Randy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to visit with you.
Randy, over the past 25 years or so, there's been a reassessment of the Carpenters' music, and today, in 2016, it's held in much higher esteem than it was, say, 30 years ago. I can tell you from my own personal experience, growing up in the 70s, we had Carpenters records in the house, but I didn't go around bragging about it because they were deemed uncool by the rock and roll crowd. Now, as I got a little older, I realized how stupid it was to worry about someone else's opinion of the music I liked. And I'd say that within the past 10 years or so, I've developed a much deeper appreciation for their music, and specifically Karen's voice, than ever before. What's your personal story with the Carpenters' music?
Well, I came along a little bit after that, and so I was born sort of in the middle of the Carpenters' heyday, so I missed a lot of it firsthand and became the Carpenters fan that I am today when I was about 13 years old after watching the TV movie The Karen Carpenter Story. So unfortunately, I was a little late to the game, and she had already passed away by the time I discovered her music. Some of it was there in my upbringing, I think. I remember Top of the World and Sing and a few other songs that a kid my age then might have known. But I did my best to catch up and learn all that I had missed. So I am very much aware, though, that the stigma attached to their music in the 1970s was quite an ordeal for a lot of fans who were diehards and then realized that not everybody around them thought that they were quite as cool as they might. So I came in kind of in the first wave of that rediscovery of their music and that reassessment of what made them great. I think that TV movie from CBS in 1989 was really something that reminded a lot of people of how fantastic their music was.
I want to ask you about their upbringing and specifically their relationship with their mother, who is a major figure in your book, Little Girl Blue. The Carpenters in interviews always referred to themselves as two kids from Downey, California, but in actual fact, that's not quite true, right?
Well, Karen and Richard actually grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, and then moved to Downey, California a little later when Karen was 13. And their mom, Agnes, was somebody who ruled the roost, you might say. She was the more domineering of the two parents, and Harold, the father, was more passive. And she had the cleanest house of anybody in the entire neighborhood. They said that you could eat off the garage floor. It was so perfectly clean and spotless. And there was such a compulsion, I think, for perfection. The neighbors said that she would be standing in the front windows and scrubbing the brass window locks. And when the neighbors' windows would be dirty, she would go to their house and clean the ones that face her house.
Oh my goodness!
So there was there was obviously an expectation of perfection and that example, and I think that carried over into both kids. And in both Karen and Richard, in a lot of ways, that was probably that same perfection that they sought musically. But when that is in the personal life, I think that's when you sometimes get something like maybe her eating disorder or obsessive compulsive disorder, things like that, where there's been that expectation all their life to perform in a certain way. And I think, it ended up doing a lot in good ways because we have that perfect pop music that they created and left for us. So I think it manifested itself in both good ways and probably some negative ones as well.
As your book points out, as far as their parents were concerned, Richard was the golden boy, the favorite son. He could do no wrong, and Karen was perceived as someone just along for the ride, sort of second rate. Now, that's not to take anything away from Richard. He was and is a brilliant composer and arranger, but it turned out that his sister was someone of the caliber of Frank Sinatra. I mean, one of those great voices of the 20th century.
Yeah, and it was really a thing where Karen's talent surprised everyone. They had no idea because she was always sort of meant to support Richard and his immense talent, and it was an immense talent. And they were looking at him as he might be his generation's answer to Liberace, that he was going to be this famous concert pianist that took the world by storm or whatever. And along comes Karen, and she's drumming to play along with the songs that Richard was doing. And then she started to sing on some of the demos and things that he was writing. And this voice just came out of nowhere, really. And very quickly, her star sort of outshined his, and he took the background role, whereas all the years growing up, he had been in the forefront and been sort of the star of the family, if that makes sense.
And they must have had the shock of their lives, because wasn't Karen offered a solo deal before there were even the Carpenters?
She was, actually. They went together to a little studio in a house in North Hollywood. A well-known studio bass player by the name of Joe Osborne had a studio in North Hollywood, and Richard and Karen went along to accompany a trumpet player that was auditioning there. And at some point in the night, Karen sang, and Joe Osborne wasn't really interested in the trumpet player, but this voice really caught his attention. And so over the next few days and weeks, he found out where they were going to be performing and wanted to go out and hear Karen sing, and he ended up signing her to his little garage label, which was called Magic Lamp Records. And yeah, she cut a single with a couple of songs, and it's one of the most rare Carpenters-related memorabilia that there is out there now.
From 1966, Karen Carpenter, her solo single, Looking for Love. Our guest today is author Randy L Schmidt. He wrote the book Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. And Randy, I think one of the most endearing elements of their music is that both Richard and Karen were into the 60s rock of their era, but they were also just as influenced by Perry Como records.
And they would always claim that the three Bs were some of their biggest influences, and the three Bs were the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and Burt Bacharach. And then a lot of times they would throw in Bach with that as well. So it was definitely a varied interest from both of them, and I think a lot of that stemmed from their father's record collection when they were kids. They grew up on those Como albums, and then once they really started discovering the music of the Beatles and the Beach Boys, that was what they were into in high school. And as those formative sounds were sort of taking shape.
It's funny, we think of Karen Carpenter as the voice of her generation, but her first love was really the drums, right?
Exactly, and she considered herself a drummer who sang, and her drums were her primary instrument over voice, and I think she long felt that way, even though she became known as one of the greatest vocalists of her time. That attraction to the drumming never really faded. She was a very serious drummer. She took it seriously enough to take lessons at Drum City in Hollywood when she was still a teenager, and she would have probably kept right on playing as the group's drummer all throughout the Carpenters' career if she were really allowed to. They came to her around 1971 as these hits started rolling in and saying, we really need somebody to front the group. And at that time, she was sort of buried behind this battery of drums, and part of her set was that she had these tunable toms that went all the way around the top of the drums, and you could just kind of see the forehead and bangs up over it, and then this voice was just booming out from back there somewhere. But they really wanted her to front the group so that there was more of a focal point, and she fought it for a while, and then finally conceded, and she decided that she would stand for a lot of the ballads, and she still wanted to play on the more up-tempo rhythmic pieces. And finally they ended up getting her completely out from behind the drums, except for little features and things like that in the later years.
I compared her to Sinatra earlier in the sense that her voice can never be background music. It's a voice that demands to be heard, and it's so emotive and melancholy. You just can't help but believe everything she's singing about.
Right, and a lot of those early hits, like Rainy Days and Mondays and Superstar, she was singing about things that she had no idea as far as her own life experiences, that what she was singing about, but she sang in a way that every word rang true, and she really became whatever song that she was performing and singing.
One of my favorites and a number one hit in 1973 for the Carpenters, Top of the World. Our guest today is author Randy L Schmidt. His book, Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. You know, one of my favorite TV clips is a clip of their 1976 TV special performing that song. And I know Richard has said that he really had no interest in doing these TV specials and looks kind of glum and awkward on them. Whereas Karen, we think of her as this melancholy figure, but Karen just comes to life on television. She has charisma off the charts and is silly and goofy and a lot of fun.
Right. Richard was definitely more awkward when it came to that, and Karen did have this kind of leading lady persona, and she just shined through. She would sparkle and was such I think a gifted comedian, and had such a great gift for timing with things like that. Just silliness and funny faces and making everybody else laugh.
See, she's at it again. Drumming. People are always asking me why Karen plays the drums.
I could answer that in 2 words. Why not?
You know, we do talk about that sad side of it, and my book is called Little Girl Blue because there were a lot of sad aspects to her story, but when you talk to people that knew her, they said that she brought so much joy to other people and was always making everybody laugh and cut up. And I think it was Olivia Newton-John who said it was kind of like a clown because, you know, you see this face and this funny, trying to make everybody laugh sort of front, but then there was this dark side underneath that was kind of under the makeup or behind the face, behind the mask, which is definitely hard to hear, but I do hope that she was as happy as she made other people, at least from time to time.
Love that song, Don't Be Afraid, from the Carpenters' debut album, Offering, 1969. Our guest today is Randy L Schmidt, the author of the book Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. Randy, would it be fair to say that Karen entered a kind of downward spiral when she tried to make a solo album?
I think that was a pretty big blow to her person. It was just such a personal project that she had poured heart and soul into, and a lot of her own personal money. And you know, she left home for New York for several months, or really for about a year off and on, to work with Phil Ramone in New York to record this. And she was so proud of it. And I think more than anything, she wanted Richard's approval and the approval of her family. And although most of her friends were very encouraging about it, even though it was quite different from a lot of her Carpenter's recordings, Richard just couldn't get behind it. He told her in the beginning, you know, yes, you have my blessing, because she was definitely wanting that. But once it was played back, both Richard and Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss and the rest of the guys at A&M Records really seemed disappointed in it. And what really kind of sad is to think about all the other albums released around that time, lesser quality, lesser overall production, and hers was somehow deemed unreleasable. She was made to feel that it wasn't worth being on the shelves in the record stores.
You know, that is just ludicrous. Now, we've heard a lot of this material after Karen passed away, and really, there's no excuse for this record to not come out. Sure, she's experimenting with all different styles and doing it exceptionally well. We're talking to author Randy L Schmidt. His book is Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter. And as we mentioned, it was the failure of getting her solo record off the ground that began this sad turn of events for Karen.
I think that was one of the first things in a series of unfortunate events that transpired over the last few years of her life. You know, it was right after the shelving of that album, or the rejection of that album, and then ultimately she shelved it. But right after that she met a man by the name of Tom Burris, who she would very soon after that marry. And just seeing how quickly that whirlwind romance happened, and
right.
Within just a few months they were already getting married. I really think she was trying to take control of something else in her life, because she had, of course, not really had much control over the drums being taken away from her. And then now here's the solo album, and she's told it's not worthy of release. And now she met this guy, and just 2 months later they're engaged, and 2 months after that they're getting married. And it was really, I think, a rebound sort of thing following that rejection of the solo album. And that was a horrible, horrible marriage. Within a year, she was just like a skeleton. It's very obvious looking at the pictures and how joyous and everything she seemed at the wedding. Just a year later, she's just gaunt and so tired looking. And I just think that really was solo album, the marriage, and then ultimately that their separation was just the final thing that caused her to even get worse.
And this fellow she married wasn't exactly forthcoming.
He was not forthcoming with her at all as far as many things. His finances, he made her think that he was quite well-to-do, and according to a lot of the close family members and people who worked for Karen at that time, her bank account began to get cleaned out very quickly. And that was one part of it. Another thing was that one of the things Karen wanted more than anything was to have children. And he didn't tell her until at the very last minute that he had a vasectomy and wouldn't be able to have children.
Jeez.
And that was a huge blow to her. And she went to her mother and said, you know, this is all a lie. He's been lying to me all along about this. And she wanted to call off the wedding. And her mother said, we're going through with it. People magazine will be there. We're flying in relatives from overseas. We're going to keep up appearances, and we'll fix this later on. And she told Karen that day that Karen went to her, she said, you've made your bed, now you'll have to lie in it.
Karen had very little control over her life, and I guess towards the end, the one thing she figured she could have control over was her weight.
Right, and there came a time, too, though, that she really didn't even feel like she had control over that. I know one of her best friends, a lady named Brenda, who is pretty well represented throughout the book. She told me that there was a time that Karen really felt out of control. You know, she had everything under control for a while, but she couldn't even take control herself at a certain point. She was in such a deep depression and was having to almost be spoon-fed at times by friends and other family members, and it was just it got way worse than I think people realize.
I know that she sought help, but perhaps it came too late.
She did. Right around the end of her marriage, around the time that they separated, 1981, late 81, early 82, she sought help from a guy named Stephen Levenkron, who had become pretty well known as a eating disorder specialist because he wrote this book, The Best Little Girl in the World. And because he was well known, she thought he must be the best. And so she moved to New York with the idea that I'm going to get well. And truthfully, I think a lot of it was to kind of get people off her back, because she didn't go and say, what can I do? I want to do everything I can. She basically went to Levenkron and said, here's what I'll do. I'm going to come see you once a day. And then she was walking to and from these appointments the mile each way so that she could continue to lose weight. And it was just she wasn't helping in her own recovery.
Right.
She was kind of sabotaging it as it went along. And over time, she actually got worse. She ended up being hospitalized near the end of it and was fed intravenously, and was able through that to gain about 30 pounds, to where on the scale, when she went back home, that it looked like it was more of a healthy weight, around 108 pounds. But it had all come on so quickly. And, she was still doing destructive things. A lot of people say that she was still taking this Ipecac to induce vomiting and things near the end. And, of course, that was part of what was ruled as the cause of death. This imitine poisoning, basically, is what it amounted to from this drug that she was taking.
Well, if there's any positive that could come out of her passing, is the fact that her death brought attention to anorexia, which at the time really no one was talking about.
Right. There was, unfortunately, it did put a face on the disorder, but fortunately I think so many people have benefited from seeing her story and possibly seeking help, not wanting that outcome. And she still is unfortunately the poster child for that. But I think at the same time, as you said, in these last 20 years or so, the music has become the focus again. Right. People don't necessarily think of her first and foremost as this tragic figure who died from anorexia complications. I think a lot of people are going back to first and foremost thinking of her as this incredible pop vocalist and one of the greatest of the last century.
Once again, the book is called Little Girl Blue, The Life of Karen Carpenter, and there's another book as well, Yesterday Once More, The Carpenter's Reader. Randy, where would people go to keep up with what you're doing these days?
Well, I have a website at randylschmidt.com, and then I also have a pretty active presence on Facebook. There's a Facebook page devoted just to the book, Little Girl Blue. And that would be a good starting place if they're interested in reaching out or finding out more about the book.
And the book, in a way, continues on that Facebook page because there's always something in the news that you're linking to, or a topic is brought up. So the book is fluid. You're actively involved in it even after it's been published. So.
Well, good. I'm glad that's apparent because that's been something I've wanted to do. The last thing I wanted to do was just have the book out and be done with it, because it really is. It's become kind of a community of Carpenter's fans that gather around that, and it brought a lot of people out of the woodwork, too. There were diehard Carpenter's fans who were waiting for anything that came out, and this book sort of rippled beyond that. It went out a little further to people who just had an appreciation for music of the 70s, or people who remembered going to a Carpenter's concert as their first concert and things like that. So as I've traveled and promoted the book around the country, I've heard so many great stories, and there are so many wonderful memories attached to this music, and I think that's what keeps it living.
Is there anything left to mine in the Carpenters catalog for you?
The Carpenters' 50th anniversary, as far as their signing with A&M Records and really the beginning of their recording career, is coming up in 2019.
Yes.
And one thing I'm kind of interested in is maybe doing a book that focuses more on the music. I mean, whereas Little Girl Blue told the story of the music and the life, I think that there's still a lot to explore as far as the stories behind the songs and behind the recordings, and something that doesn't delve too much into their personal lives, but a lot about the music making. So there's a little bit of work going on right now between myself and a co-author, and we'll see where that goes and how that develops over the next few years.
All right, sounds interesting. Randy, we're going to be ending this segment here, but I want to end it with a song that you've chosen. So what would be a good song to go out on, your favorite Carpenters recording?
Well, the first one that always comes to mind for me, and is, I have kind of an alternating list of favorites from time to time, but the one that's always at the top of my list is Superstar, which is the 1971 song. Most people know it as, Don't You Remember You Told Me You Love Me, Baby, those lyrics. But, what a gorgeous and haunting melody that is, and with the oboe and everything, just a stunning production. I think it showcases not only Karen's delivery of a song, which is reported to have been done in one take, but that was the first take, but also Richard's arranging and the way he surrounded her voice so beautifully. So Superstar is always my number one.
All right, Randy, thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you.